Welcome back to Briggs on Books. Before you pick your next book you're going to read this summer or this fall, check out this one, The Woman Left Behind. It's a fascinating tale. And by the way, I just happen to have the author here, Christos Morris. And Christos is the guy who truly makes this an international show because he goes from Greece to Minnesota to Australia. Where are you now, Christos?
Well, I'm on the tropics of northern Australia. I used to live in Melbourne. We moved up here 3,000 miles away in a tropical paradise, which is normally very hot and warm. The ocean's only a block away. And however, tonight or this morning, because it's 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, the temperature is the coldest it's been in 30 years.
Oh my goodness. Can you tell us what that is in Fahrenheit?
Well,
or centigrade, whatever you guys do over there.
Listen, what tropical cold you'd laugh at. They hear people go berserk and wear UGG boots when it's 50 degrees. So.
Well, it's early afternoon here, and it is what there, morning, early morning?
Early morning.
Yeah, and we're at in the triple digits, 110s in California, and you are having a freeze or a heat wave?
Well, right now this is our winter. We have two seasons. We have a dry season, which none of us ever knew who come from another climate.
Yeah.
It has a dry season. It could be no rain for 2 months. Or the wet season where we can get 3 feet of rain in a month.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So, and the humidity is 100%. So it's well, Minnesota was very similar. We had snow, winter, and then we had road fixing season. Those are the only 2 seasons in Minnesota.
Yeah. By the way, our author, Christos Morris, is a storyteller. Before we even got on the air, he's told me, I think, 3 different stories, and great stories, too. I don't know if we'll get any of them on during this interview, but here is your book, The Woman Left Behind. I think it starts in Greece. Tell us about the book, Christos.
Well, I'll tell you the beginning of all this, talking about storytelling. When I was a boy, my father, after dinner, would take my sister and I, and we'd all lay on the couch. And the couch was, a little narrow little thing, and we're hanging on for dear life. And he would tell stories about the old country. Now, he was a storyteller. His sort of stories were visual. They're like paintings. And it allowed me to jump inside his paintings. And I could walk around the island. I saw the Aegean Sea. I smelt the salt air. I could go into the orchards. I met the donkeys, all this sort of stuff. He had a life that was so exotic to me as a child in Minnesota. I lived in a Swedish neighborhood, so it was not Greek. And that set me up for life. That storytelling. And if I had any advice to any of your listeners, if you want to write a book, if you haven't written one, be very visual. People will remember what you say if you can see what you're going to write ahead of time. And if you can do that, it'll be helpful. And that's basically what I learned from those stories of my dad.
And that's how your dad told his stories, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Amazing. So they start in Greece. And I don't know how much we could give away, but a young man, he wanted to get out of Greece. He leaves Greece, and he left something behind. What was that?
Well, he left a few things behind. He left behind his wife, who loves him, and he sort of had a life of failure. And at the time of the turn of the 20th century, Greece was under the Ottoman Empire, and success there was almost impossible. So he wasn't the only one to leave his island. The men were fleeing out of the island and going to every country on earth. He had first tried to go to Britain, and they said no. But if you fight in the Boer War for us, we will allow you in. When he fights in the Boer War, they didn't allow him in. And he ends up on a ship trying to find his way back home, and he gets sick, and they throw him overboard, thinking he had the. Yeah, they did. It's a true story. And they threw him overboard, thinking he had a problem, that he had the plague. Well, he didn't have the plague, and 6 or 7 days later, he's picked up by a Norwegian freighter. His tongue is purple and he can't breathe because it's just swollen from the salt, and he survives. So he returns home and says, I gotta go find the American dream.
Yeah.
And he leaves his wife behind, and he leaves behind a painting. Now, there's a painting by El Greco that had been passed down for 300 years. And it's been sought after. It was a stolen painting by a Venetian aristocrat who never paid for it. And El Greco knew an early ancestor, and he stole it back. Well, of course, this was a sin beyond description. And apart from the death penalty and or going to jail forever, the painting was sought after for 300 years. So he hides in a Greek burial crypt, and he leaves that behind. And he heads off to join his brothers in Minneapolis, and he has no idea that the early 20th century is problematic in getting a job.
Yep.
So what happens after all this? Look, it's a story about loss. It's a story about displacement. It's a story about corruption. It's a story about people longing to fit in. Now, all that has to do with the problems that were going on, but really the bottom line of this story is the story about love. So he hasn't quite worked that out yet. He goes away telling his wife that he will be back a very successful man. But success is not easy to find. And years pass by. So he's been identifying with this. He finds out that the painting has been stolen out of the burial crypt.
Oh, boy.
And he identifies with El Greco because El Greco had a hell of a time in Venice, and he was treated poorly. And he went on to Rome, and he was also a very arrogant man, didn't help. He went on to Rome, and it was impossible. He couldn't get jobs, and he went to Spain. So he saw those problems as his own. The problems he was having were very similar. That the painting has disappeared, is gone, after 300 years of looking after it and hiding it in the roof of his house, was almost too much to bear.
Yeah.
So anyway, many years pass, and Marocco, his wife, has to survive. And the only way she can survive is by pretending he's dead. And the very opening chapter of the book is the fact that when he left, he also left behind the fact that he didn't know his wife was pregnant.
Oh, boy.
So she was not going to hold him back by saying, you know, I'm pregnant and you have to stay here. She wanted him to have his dream. Now, the story of Greek women is not a good one.
Right.
When they got married, you allow the men to dream, but the women cannot.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so she writes her husband in the very first chapter, 18 years after he has left. The son is 18 years old.
Oh, boy.
His dad has been sending him letters about the glories of America. He doesn't believe any of it, but he's trying to tell him how life is great, the fishing is terrific,
Yeah.
beautiful scenery, and the people are treating us very well. Jobs are everywhere. Of course, jobs were not everywhere, and houses were being burnt down if you were Greek or Italian at the time, and run out of town. I mean, you wouldn't believe the stuff that was going on back then. And similarly, where they're being blamed for, all migrants, but particularly if you had a darker skin, you know, from southern Italy or southern Greece or something, and the poor Chinese, they copped it. And in 1924, they passed a law called the Johnson-Reed Act that stopped Greeks and Italians from entering America. But his son goes there as 18. And the letter says, your son is coming. I can't hold him any longer. Your letters have got him here, so it's you. You got him now. He got
the dream himself. He has got to go to America.
He's looking for the American dream.
Yeah.
He gets there, and they're very different men, totally different men. One is very practical, his son, and Stratis is a man whose head has always been in the clouds. It's sort of like the relationship between Plato and Aristotle. Plato has a painting called by Raphael, called what's the name of it? The School of Athens.
Yep.
And every intellectual is in this painting for the 5,000 years or something. And in the center of it we have Aristotle on the left, on the right, well, on the left and the right we're looking at, and Plato on the right. Plato is pointing to the sky and Aristotle is pointing to the earth. Aristotle says, keep your feet on the ground.
Yep.
And Plato is saying, no, I'd rather have my head in the clouds.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between the two men.
Yeah. Christos, they only give us 10 or 12 minutes here. I want to hear you talk all day long. But tell us where people can get this book. You've sold me on the book. I'm going to get the book right away. Where can people get that book?
All right. I have a website, ChristosMorrisAuthor.com.
Yeah, we had that right on the screen here. ChristosMorrisAuthor.com.
Author.com.
Yeah.
There's a website there. It'll say all the stuff, what I've written. I haven't. This is my second book.
Okay.
My first book won an award in New York, so and I had never intended being a writer, at all. I was more interested in archaeology or quantum physics or something, but not to write a book. But I met an archaeologist in my first book who told me the most amazing story and showed me the things that he had buried. I accused him of burying. That's how I met him. And he wrote a massive article in the National Geographic. I read it and immediately got on an airplane and went to Crete, where he was director of the National Gallery. And I got in the office after about 7 tries, lying. You wouldn't see me. I'm not an archaeologist, just nothing. And he said, how can I help you? You're a very serious man. And I said, well, I read your article on National Geographic and I want to know why you lied. And he said, I beg your pardon. What do you mean by that? And I said, you didn't tell the truth. And he said, why didn't I tell the truth? And I said, you don't believe the dead are dead. And everything fell over. And he said, what are you doing now? And I said, I had a plane ticket in an hour. And go back down. And I said, nothing. And he said, he calls his driver and he takes me up to the mountains and we stayed for a week and he showed me everything.
Wow.
And I said, you've got to write a book about this. And he says, I have a reputation. I'm the best known archaeologist in the world for Minoan and Mycenaean studies. You write the book. I said, all right, I will.
Okay.
That's the beginning of an author.
That's how it got started.
That started. And that book won an award, so somebody liked it.
Christos,
Anyway,
they're telling me we're totally out of time, but I just want to give you a minute. Any last thoughts you want to tell our viewers, readers, about you, about anything in the world?
Well, look, enjoy the book. It has a lot of truth in the book, but the only thing I can tell what your writer and readers is that if you're ever going to write a book, don't write it about yourself. And if you do write it about yourself, this is what you do. You take a telescope and look at the moon. You fly to the moon and sit down in a chair with your computer. And you look back at yourself. When you look at yourself from afar, you will tell the truth. So that's my only advice I can say, or from a writer to a writer, or starting writer.
Last thought, Christos, tell me the name of the first book, because I'm going to read that as well.
It's called, here, I'll show it to you.
Just happen to have a copy there, huh?
That's the first book, Digging at the Crossroads of Time.
Okay.
You're not going to find it because it's out of print.
Okay.
But you will find it. It keeps on popping up. I've got a friend of mine who's a physicist, and he. In
that case, I'll be starting with this book. Here's the cover, The Woman Left Behind. I'm going to order it. I'm going to read it. Then we're going to make Christos come back, and I'm going to ask him a million questions about it because Christos always has another story. Thank you, Christos.
Thanks very much, Mike.
And
thanks for having me.
Hope to have you back very soon. And for our viewers,
you.
stick around. We'll have another author right after this.
Okay.